Chapter 6. With the crisp air stinging and the huntsman singing. From the perspective of Jacques, in the year 1789. Quote from Tiberius Caesar. To be a good shepherd is to shear the flock, not skin it. Crisp air, frosted grass, and changing colors meant hunting season was near. My father's game wardens taught me to hunt when I was young and started a lifelong obsession. I loved it. It was man against nature and required patience, endurance, and skill. How to look for signs, tracks, and beds. How to recognize the calls of big game, and those of game birds like pheasant and geese, and the drumming of partridge. How to shoot a weapon, field-dress prey, and put food on your table. It wasn't for everybody, but definitely for me. My game preserve was known for its prevalence and diversity of game. I'd built a humble but functional cabin in the bowels of its forest, and my friends gladly accepted invitations to hunt there. The year before, Geoffroy studied the activity as we gathered for the hunt. He watched with tilted head and raised eyebrows, intermingling with the hunting party and asking questions as they readied their horses, weapons, and supplies. It was an early fall afternoon, and I was in my study reading a correspondence from Versailles. A mob of starving citizens had charged the Bastille and murdered its governor, triggering a serious backlash. Now, the corrupt National Assembly was openly encouraging rebellion. Things are out of hand. Soon Angoulême might be affected. Where will this end? I pushed myself back into my leather chair and pondered the situation, arms folded and resting on my chest. Geoffroy peeked in. "Père, may I speak to you?" I looked, rubbed my forehead, and turned to see his bright eyes staring, highlighting a gentle smirk. "Of course, come in. I need a break. What is it?" He walked tentatively to my desk and placed the fingers of both hands on it. "Père, I was wondering, it's almost hunting season." He paused and drummed his fingers, then stepped back. "Would you teach me to hunt?" His words instantly produced a giddy lightness, and my other concerns evaporated. I'd relished the thought of this moment since Geoffroy's birth. "Teach you to hunt?" I clapped my hands together. "To be honest, there's nothing I'd enjoy more." Geoffroy's face transformed. He curled his hands into fists and thumped them on the desk. "Yes, thank you, Père. I'm so ready. I can't wait." For the next 2 weeks, I watched Geoffroy question everyone about hunting. His instructors, the longshoremen, and the estate staff. 100 questions. What are the best animals to hunt? How to find them? Where were the best places to hunt? What was the best weapon to hunt with? He digested each answer with great enthusiasm. In preparation, I stressed Geoffroy needed to understand the purpose and meaning of hunting, that it was more than a sport, that its ultimate objective was to provide food for one's family, and that he needed to take this training more seriously than any other, since it involved taking life. On the following Thursday evening, I instructed Geoffroy to wake early and dress warmly, and explained that we would be riding to our hunting cabin. He flashed a toothy grin. "All right, I'm headed to bed," and skipped down the hallway. "Good night, Père." I crawled into bed and pulled the comforter over my chest. "Geneviève, I'm really looking forward to tomorrow. We're off to the cabin. I feel like a young boy on Christmas morning. Imagine, I'm actually taking one of my sons hunting." "Sweetheart," she moved closer and placed her warm hand on my cool stomach. "I'm happy for you too, but promise me you'll be careful." "Of course. What could happen? He's a smart boy, he listens, and will only be gone for a few days." "What time are you leaving? I'll get up to wish you off." "No, you don't have to. It will be early. I can't wait." I shoved my cold feet between her warm legs. Geneviève rolled her eyes, pulled her legs away. "Oh, child!" and slipped off to sleep. I lay in bed, tossing and turning, contemplating the following day, excited. I woke early and felt even more excited than expected. It was time to get started. Our horses were saddled before dawn, and we departed leading a pack horse laden with supplies. It was a dark, crisp, and cold morning. The woods came alive as the sun crested the trees. I watched as Geoffroy leaned in his saddle, eyes aglow, seemingly spellbound by the beauty. The morning frost had transformed the ferns, tree branches, and underbrush into a glistening paradise. Wispy breath steamed from the horses' nostrils as they plodded along the trail. Geoffroy lifted his face into the air and drew a deep breath. "It smells amazing. Look at all those trees, all the colors. It's beautiful," he half whispered. It was his first trip this deeply into the preserve, and from his smile, intense stare, and deep sighs, I knew he was enjoying it. I pushed back in my saddle and watched. My cheeks tingled, chilled by the crisp morning air, but my insides filled with a special warmth. I listened to him hum, saw as he yawned, and then watched as a smile broke out across his rosy cheeks. After some time, as he studied his surroundings, he asked, "How long before we get there?" "Patience, son. It's still a ways." I nodded in the direction. "Up ahead." I was enjoying this ride more than I had expected. Our conversation flowed, and time passed. Finally, we rode across a small stream that bordered our hunting cabin's clearing. There it stood with its stone foundation, split log walls, solid wood door, and glass windows enclosed by sturdy wooden shutters. Its roof was shingled with cedar shakes, and a large fieldstone fireplace and chimney jutted out its rear. "Père, it's magnifique! I didn't think it would be so nice." "Oui, it's nice enough. A fine place to eat, tell tall tales, and sleep." I dismounted, tied the horses to a porch post, and unlocked the cabin's door. "Geoffroy, unload the pack horse, s'il vous plaît, while I get kindling and firewood." "Oui, père." He dismounted and unpacked the duffels and bags from the pack animal, then removed the horse's tack and led them into the corral behind the cabin. I opened shutters and windows, allowing the forest air to permeate the cabin's stuffiness. I stretched and took a deep breath. Finally here. Now let me show you what we'll hunt with today. I selected 2 fowling pieces from the gun cabinet and gave him one. "We'll use these this morning, but first, we'll clean and prep them to ensure they work when needed." I handed Geoffroy a cleaning rod and some cloth swabs, and we cleaned our guns. "Today we'll point these at living creatures. Anytime you aim a weapon at something, be sure it works. Your weapons are your best friend, so always prepare them properly. Understand?" "Oui." I handed him a powder flask and bag of shot, then hung a game bag over his shoulder. "This morning we'll hunt for lunch." "We're ready?" he questioned with a gulp, his eyes saucers. "Hunt for lunch? I'm hungry already. What are we going to hunt?" "Partridge. Our game warden says they're prime this year, and he's seen multiple coveys near an evergreen grove about 800 meters from here." "I love partridge. How long will it take to find them?" he prattled excitedly. "It shouldn't be long before we'll enjoy a hearty lunch." I patted his back. "Let's go." About halfway to the grove, I loaded my fowling piece. I poured gunpowder and rammed a wad into its breech. I did the same to about 30 small birdshot, poured a small charge of powder into its frizzen pan, and flipped it closed. I showed Geoffroy how to do the same. We stalked to the evergreen grove with guns at the ready. Within 7 meters of the evergreens, a noisy commotion erupted. 16 to 20 partridge broke into flight, scattering in various directions. Geoffroy's mouth dropped, and he jumped back. I shouldered my piece, aimed, and squeezed its trigger. Feathers puffed from one of the birds as it slumped in flight and fell to the ground. "We've got our first partridge," I blurted, heart pounding and hands clenching my fowling piece's breech. "A good start on our lunch. Now let's get some more." I started walking to fetch the bird, then looked back at Geoffroy. He'd frozen. His neck and cheeks were ashen, and his mouth gaping. "Are you okay, son? You're a bit flushed." "I think so." He walked to where the bird dropped, white knuckles gripping his gun's stock. "Everything happened so quickly." I stepped behind him and patted his shoulder. "Take a minute. To be honest, even my heart's pounding." He picked up the bird and handed it to me. "I'm okay. It just happened so fast. How did you aim and fire so quickly? You didn't flinch. Weren't you surprised? I didn't even raise my gun." "I've had lots of practice, and you did well to deal with such a surprise. It can be startling. Now come, let's get a few more." And we did, catching 6 partridge in all, enough for a fine lunch. Geoffroy did his best. He got his gun up 4 times and fired twice. No birds, but a good start for a novice hunter. At the cabin, I built a fire and readied the birds. I showed him how to clean and debone the breasts from the carcasses and wash them. I prepared the perfect stew, roasted partridge breast, carrots, and potatoes. I added rosemary, anise, and bay leaf for seasoning, and then I stirred flour, tawny port, and sweet cognac into the broth for gravy. "Come, honor your chef by tasting his pièce de résistance. We'll call it civet de perdu pour Geoffroy." Geoffroy stared, looking famished, as I ladled the partridge and vegetables onto plates and bathed them with the rich gravy. I ripped 2 pieces of baguette and placed them in the broth of each plate, then poured 2 cups of white wine. "Lunch is served, Your Highness." We wolfed down our first serving. The fowl was tender, the vegetables perfectly done, and the fruity wine accentuated the savory gravy. Geoffroy asked for seconds, devoured it with the same gusto. "This is magnifique, père. Where did you learn to prepare it?" "You like it? Good. I learned from years of bivouac as a young officer in the Hussars." I beamed and curled pinched lips. "And perhaps some natural talent." "Like it? I love it. It's delicious." He licked a dab of gravy from the corner of his mouth. Geoffroy took the remainder of the baguette, sopped his tin plate clean, and devoured the bread and gravy. "So, let's clean up, then get some target practice. Grab the plates and utensils, and I'll clean the Dutch oven." He washed the plates, wiped them, and put them neatly on the pantry counter. All right, here's what we'll use for our next hunt. I took 2 rifles from the gun cabinet and we cleaned and prepared them. We walked a couple 100 meters from the cabin and set up targets. We started practicing at 30 paces, then 50, finally 100 paces. We practiced the better part of the afternoon, loading, shooting, reloading, and continued until Geoffroy was consistently hitting the target at 100 paces. By the end of the afternoon, Geoffroy was ready. We finished and strolled back to the cabin. Geoffroy, I think you're a natural marksman. Your instructors obviously trained you well. Thanks, but honestly, Guillaume is a better shot than me. He's a talented little fellow. He looked at me and smirked. Well, I guess he's not that little. For dinner, I prepared cured ham and lentils. After our meal, we snacked on cheese, raisins, and nuts for dessert. We sat by the fire and relaxed our tired bodies, absorbing its warmth. I'll bring in more firewood, and you do the dishes. I stoked the fire, laid leather pads on the floor, and we covered with heavy wool blankets, tired and satisfied. What a blessing to be alive and have sons like this. The fire crackled, and I drifted into sleep. The scent and sound of sizzling bacon filled the cabin as I watched Geoffroy awake. Did you sleep well? He yawned, inhaled deeply, and smiled. Oui, that bacon smells really good, and I'm starving. He rubbed his sleepy eyes and licked his lips. Grab some biscuits and tea while I serve. I carefully lifted the cast-iron pan from the fireplace boom and walked to the table. We downed the bacon and biscuits with preserves from the haversack. I made sandwiches from the leftovers and packed them for field rations. I fitted our rifles with leather slings to carry them over our shoulders, and we started our journey into the northeast section of the preserve. I was especially awake and energized. Today, I'd see how Geoffroy handled hunting big game. It's about an hour's walk. Our warden tells me he's seen plenty of deer and boar where we're headed. I navigated through different groves of trees and brush as the forest got thicker. We plodded along, talking as we traveled. I explained the surroundings, pointing out features in the landscape, different trails and animal prints, trees, herbs, and rock formations. I detailed where swamps, streams, and springs could be found in the preserve, and we discussed deer hunting. By fall, fawns mature and fend for themselves, so males, bucks, and females, does, start their mating season. The bucks become especially active and seek does. I stopped and rested my rifle on the ground. In mating season, certain sounds draw their attention, so today we're going to make those sounds to trick and draw them to us. How do we make the sounds? I've got the tools we'll use in my haversack. I'll show you once we've reached our destination. As we progressed deeper into the woods, Geoffroy's body language changed. He stood taller, fidgeted, bit his lips, and fingered his rifle as we walked. How much farther, Père? Not much. I think it's just over that small rise. How many deer have you shot? He looked at me with wide eyes. Quite a few, more than I can remember. But I do remember the first and how excited I was. Good, because I'm excited. So excited. I feel like I'm shaking. He rolled his tongue on the inside of his cheek. I just want to get there. So you're nervous? I guess, maybe. I'm not sure how nervous feels. He took a deep breath. I know my stomach feels warm and my skin feels crawly, and I think I'd better take a pee before we go too much farther. I smiled. That's a good sign, and I'm glad you told me. We'll need to walk off the trail away. We don't want the deer to get scent of it. We crested the rise and found the trail marks I was looking for, including a well-worn deer trail. We'll have to get off this trail, so we'll climb that rise to ensure we're downwind and they can't pick up our scent. Geoffroy's cheeks were flushed. Whew, that was a hike. Even with this sling, this rifle gets heavy, he said, sweat beading his forehead. We climbed to a knoll near a copse of trees on an elevated rise. He gazed at the breathtaking expanse spread before him. To the north, a hardwood grove of crimson red, tan, and tawny brown maples, oaks, and elms. To the east, a large verdant clearing in front of taupe strands of swamp brush. To the south, behind us, was the path we'd hiked. To the west, the fluttering yellow and beige of aspen and birch trees. I checked the wind's direction and found a suitable location adjacent to some scrub oak brush. We'll post on this rise. It's high enough and downwind so the game won't smell or spot us. The deer trail is about 70 paces down the hill. I expect they'll come there once we start calling them. Geoffroy stared toward the trail, fingering his rifle, nibbling his lower lip. I pulled a pair of deer antler stakes and a large wood whistle from my haversack. We'll rattle these antler stakes together to mimic the sound of 2 bucks fighting and get their attention, I said enthusiastically. I rattled them, then stopped and started again. I did so for about 5 to 6 minutes. Then, we waited. Geoffroy rubbed his sweating forehead with the back of his hand, struggling to sit still. No results. Next, I grabbed the whistle and blew into it, making a low, breathy snort. Geoffroy's head perked. "Père, that sounds like you're breaking wind," he giggled. "Shh," I whispered. "Listen, and keep your eyes peeled." I continued the routine, rattling stakes and snorting with the whistle for another 25 minutes. Geoffroy sat pensively and peered through the brush, shifting his rifle from arm to arm. Brush rustled to our far right. His head straightened and his eyes pinched as he turned to listen. I grabbed the stakes and rattled twice, then made the snorting sound. "Hopefully it's deer," I whispered, grabbed my rifle and quietly cocked it. I motioned for Geoffroy to do the same. He knelt into the ready position, focused and steady. Slowly, almost nonchalantly, about 80 paces to our front, a doe strolled into the clearing below. Geoffroy froze, took a deep breath, and pointed at the doe. "Oui, I see her. Steady. Hopefully she's got company." My heart pounded. Even after all my years of hunting, still exhilarated. "If a buck's following her, he's yours to bag," I whispered, a tingling sensation climbing my neck. The doe bent her head to the ground and pulled up a mouthful of greenery. As she did, a buck strutted gracefully into the clearing on her far side. He was huge, 2 hands taller, with tawny tan fur and a brilliant white chest. Geoffroy's eyes bulged. Wrapping white knuckles tightly around his rifle's breech, he exhaled a deep sigh. "Do you have a shot?" I asked, heart pounding. "Not a good one. The doe's blocking my view." He swallowed and took another deep breath. "Steady. They don't seem in a hurry. Just breathe slowly and don't worry. They'll move." I watched him flexing his fingers around the stock and slowly pivoting his head. "Should I find a better spot, Père?" "No, you're good. Let him move to where you're comfortable to take a shot. Don't hurry. Place the sight just behind its upper front shoulder and shoot when you're ready," I murmured. The doe's tail fluttered casually as she took a few graceful steps toward a small fir tree. I watched as Geoffroy slowly adjusted his rifle's angle and aimed. He inhaled. The stag moved a step closer toward the doe, turned its head and snorted. Geoffroy's eyes widened, and he licked his lips. His target was now in a better position. He took a deep breath and squeezed the trigger. Flame and smoke burst from the rifle's barrel as it recoiled, jerking upward. The stag wobbled and swayed to his right. His front legs buckled and he slumped to his chest. The doe lurched at the sound of the shot and bounded into the forest. The buck righted himself, reeled, and frantically bolted from the clearing into thick brush. Geoffroy stared, his mouth agape. "Père, I missed it." "No, son, he's hit. The way he staggered and dropped to his knees means he's wounded badly. He wouldn't have done that if you'd missed. We'll be able to tell how badly he's hit. I'm sure there'll be a good blood trail." I told Geoffroy to reload, and we carried our rifles to where the huge stag had stood. I closely surveyed the ground and brush where he'd jumped. "He'll run as far as he can, which I expect won't be far. He'll provide a fine meal tonight." Geoffroy was ashen, and sweat beaded his forehead. He stepped back, eyes wide with tears welling. "I just wounded him? Will he get away? How badly is he hurt?" I patted him on the back. "Son, your aim was perfect. He's a huge specimen, perhaps a trophy. Strong enough that even a great shot wouldn't have dropped him." "Whew," he sighed. "I feel dizzy." He sat on a stump, wiped his forehead, and laid his rifle in his lap. "Good. Sit a while and settle yourself. I'll search for a blood trail." I was excited, and a warm lightness filtered through me. Geoffroy's shot was clean. Now I wanted to find his trophy. I placed a large stone where the buck had been hit and started walking in progressively larger diameter circles, using the stone as my center point, scanning the ground for blood. Starting at a radius of 4 paces from the stone, then 8 paces, then 12. At 12, the first sign. A few large spots of blood. "Geoffroy, come look. We've got a good blood trail, just as I expected." He came and looked. "Thanks, but that's not very much," he mumbled, dropping his chin. "It took less than a second for him to bound to here. This is a very good sign. I'm sure we'll find much more." I resumed the ritual of circling, using the first blood marker as my center point to find the next, and soon encountered an even bigger blotch. I continued until I was sure of the wounded stag's direction. At 75 paces, it was clear that he was bleeding badly. "He's severely wounded and wants water. He's heading toward the swamp." I broke off a limb and pushed it into the ground to mark that location. "Congratulations, son," I yelled triumphantly. "It's safe to say you've got your first kill." I walked to Geoffroy and hugged him. Geoffroy sighed deeply, wiped his forehead, and whispered, "Thank you, Père. Thank goodness." And he hugged me again. "Toward the swamp? How far is that?" "It's a distance, but I don't think he'll make it that far. The forest is dense. Even I might get lost, so I need you to go back to where we were and watch and listen." If you hear me shoot, I want you to fire your rifle into the air. The sound will help guide me. Keep listening, and every time you hear a shot, shoot in response, all right? Oui, père, I will. I watched Geoffroy head back up the rise. I went back to where I staked the blood trail and began tracking. It was a slow process, but after a kilometer, the spotted trail turned into a continuous stream. It wouldn't be much farther. I found the stag lying in a patch of reeds and cattails. He'd bled and died about 1.5 kilometers from where he'd been hit. He had a 12-point rack that spanned 3/4 of a meter. I tossed a rope over a tree limb and cinched one end around its rear legs. I pulled the carcass up off the ground with its head facing downward, then used my knife to sever one of the large arteries in its neck. Blood gushed, then slowly dripped from it. I field-dressed and lowered it back to the ground, then tried to drag it through the thick reeds and brush. The stag's size and weight, coupled with my bad leg, made moving it impossible. I'd never be able to get it back to Geoffroy's location, let alone the cabin. I'd have to get a horse. It was now late, so I needed to send a signal to Geoffroy. I shouldered my rifle and fired a shot into the air.